Relax.
This is Bill 2.0. Paper copies. And we have, thank you, welcome back. We have Representative Wall with us. Yeah, I assume you're the reporter of the bill?
Yeah.
All right. So why don't, this is the first we're looking at it. We're just doing a brief overview. So why don't you, in general, talk about what's going on here, and then we can have Legislative Counsel Katie McCrin walk us through the bill in a little bit more detail, but we don't have a lot of time this morning. We just have to get the 411.
Yes, and again, my apologies to the committee. Being at the end of the
We've been having a rough morning ourselves in terms of
We're
organization.
getting lots done.
No, I know, but it's been a little unwieldy.
So this bill concerns a relatively new concept of final disposition of human remains. It's a process called natural organic reduction. And basically what it does, it's the terminology is a little bit misleading because they help nature out a little bit. Basically, the body is not involved in any way. The body is placed in a container with materials which can be wood chips, it can be alfalfa, straw, some moisture, it's a heat, and it's allowed to decompose. And
In the ground.
no, in a container in a facility. So the body is not there. So it's tightly self-contained, and the facility would have to be built in order to allow this process, because there's nothing in the state like this right now. And so what we heard in testimony that in about a month, what you have is a cubic yard of compost. And that the process is so thorough and the heat generated is so high that it removes all possibility of any pathogens surviving the process. And basically, even the most difficult components of the body, bones, teeth, and so on, are all decomposed. So that's what we're proposing to allow here. So this bill basically does just a couple of things. It ended up being 38 pages long, but that's because we changed so many instances of terminology. That's why it's so long. And so the essence of the bill is to allow this process and to treat it the same way as we do cremation in statute. And so what we've done, one of the changes we've made is that we removed the term crematory and crematorium, I think, for both of the statute. We now use the term disposition facility to cover cremation and natural organic reduction. Because at the end, the two processes are similar in some way in the end result. You have something that is not human remains in any recognizable way. You have either ashes or you have soil. There's only one instance in the current statute where we did not make that change. I think it's section 7. I might have to check here. That's the instance in which DCF, yes, it is section 7. That's the instance in which DCF is paying for the cremation and remains are not claimed. Current statute says that if that is the case, if DCF is paid for the process and the remains are unclaimed, the Office of the Chief Medical Examiner must hang on to those remains for 3 years. Now, that's a problem if you have a cubic yard of soil. It's not a big problem if you have an urn of ashes that can go on a shelf. But we were told by the health department that could be a real issue, especially if they have a cubic yard of soil, and another cubic yard of soil, and another cubic yard of soil. they're supposed to keep somewhere for 3 years. That's much more than can go into a water. And so we did not add natural or organic reduction in that one section of the statute. We did not make any changes. And so natural organic reduction is not covered just in that specific case. The DCF pays for the cremation and remains unclaimed. Otherwise, we basically treat it like cremation.
So,
Any questions?
yeah. So is this a relatively new, as first I'm hearing about it, I mean, does this law exist in other states, or is this process fairly commonplace and prevalent elsewhere in the country?
It's legal now in 3 states, Colorado, Oregon, and Washington. And I had a list, I think it was 7 or 8 states who were actively considering it. So it's not widespread.
Okay.
And I think it's been legal in those 3 states I mentioned for only like 2 or 3 years.
So
So yeah,
what's the genesis? Is it like people are not satisfied with cremation or burial, they want another alternative? And be so naive, but what is
Yeah.
their thinking why the other two don't work?
that's exactly right, Senator. And there are those who are opposed to the process of embalming and so on, and burial, because of the toxic chemicals involved. I think it's a waste of land, to be taking up so much land. But they're also not satisfied with the process of cremation. They prefer to be returned to the soil. And in some religions, that is basically it. The body is buried without the embalming in any ways. So this process, this kind of speeds up the process. But again, you don't need a cemetery plot for this.
But a cubic yard is pretty big. Where does that, the family member takes that cubic yard,
Right.
brings it to their house, or they bury that yard, that cubic box themselves?
Right, we did not touch that, so whatever you can do with cremated remains in statute, now you could also do with the natural organic reduction.
So when you, in burial, right now, does that by definition mean you embalm somebody, or could you?
No, not necessarily, because a few years ago, we have our green burials.
Yeah.
So, but that usually means the cemetery has to set aside a special section just for green burials, if I remember correctly.
You could do that on your own land too.
So the difference here would be, I mean, if you had a green burial, you put the deceased in a coffin,
Wooden box,
and you
Cardboard
bury that
box.
as part of the cemetery. Here, you would be doing the same, there's nothing added at all in this, when you put the remains.
No, it's all organic.
Okay.
And in the case of green burials, you can use a box that decomposes or just a shroud.
Right.
Right.
You don't have to
You
have
don't even have to
a
have a box.
fancy container or nothing.
So what's the difference between the green burial and this?
Well, in the green burial, you put the body in the ground and then let nature do its thing. And you have to be very precise, if I remember the testimony, this is exactly how deep you bury the person. Too deep and it doesn't work, too shallow.
I heard it.
Right, it's like 3 feet.
3 feet. So
It's not 6 feet.
Right,
I
right.
believe it's 3 feet.
Right, thank you. Yeah, I knew there were some parameters there. In the case of natural organic reduction, you don't have to worry about that at all, and you don't have to worry about, a burial plot, or platting and all that.
So that's essentially the difference. You don't, the green burial, it mandates a burial. Here, you could keep the box however long you want, wherever you want.
So can I just add about why cremation is also a challenge? Cremation uses a huge amount of energy. So that is one of the reasons I've heard that people oppose it, is that it uses a huge amount of fossil fuel. And but so that's one of the other things. But this is this is uses less energy and is much more natural
It's cheaper.
and a lot cheaper. So that's one of the reasons I'm sort of puzzled by the DCF thing, is if it's a lot cheaper, I would think DCF would want to be doing this. And we didn't preclude the opportunity for DCF to do this, did we?
Well, originally, when we originally wrote the statute, we did, but we got that notification from the health department that that could be a storage problem.
It could be a storage problem, but it's a price opportunity for them to do it at a less expensive cost.
True, true. And I
So-
suppose the other approach you could take is say the office of the chief medical examiner could not have to hold on to those remains for 3 years.
Yeah,
That would be
We could also
another
do that.
approach, but
So,
Representative Waltz, you may not know that once upon a time on House General, I did all the burial bills. And I'm sorry if that has become you. It's a particular kind of chore. A joy at times as well. My question, perhaps as a Hindu, is just about whether or not you looked at the issue of transporting organic remains across state and international lines.
absolutely. And we do not address that in the bill. We're
Okay.
leaving that alone, whatever exists. And our understanding is that there are agreements between the states.
Okay,
So if you have the misfortune of going to Maine and dying there, Vermont and Maine have worked out
okay,
the details on that.
okay.
and international. Did you
The
tell
same thing internationally, yeah. There are agreements.
So this facility, the understanding would be this facility would tell you, this is what you are legally allowed to do with these remains. You can go back to this state, but not this country, et cetera, et cetera.
But
It is an organic item, so I just wonder.
Right, well, yeah, and we especially look at that issue because what if you do die in another state, another country that doesn't do this?
Or what if you're supposed to take remains to a certain
Right,
place, is what I was thinking.
right.
you're taking it?
Might not be able to get on an airplane, I don't know.
right, well, I've had that experience personally with having to transport remains
Okay.
by airplane. And that turned out not to be an issue, it was between Vermont and Florida,
Great,
that turned out not to be an issue, so we're just leaving that alone, we're not
Okay.
going there.
because
whatever
there was
exists.
existing law.
Right,
so Russ,
Yeah, I just want to make sure I understand the final disposition options. Could you explain those?
well, right now, what we allow in Vermont, as you know, you can bury grandpa in the backyard if you want to, we allow that in Vermont. And of course, you have to meet health codes and so on. And the same thing applies to if you want to scatter ashes. You may want to check with the health codes in your community just to make sure there are no issues going on there.
And my father-in-law is beneath a newly planted maple tree, for example.
Right.
Yes, and people do choose to do exactly that, and that's fine. And so we're not touching that. We're saying, okay, if you choose to, well, let me give you an example. State of Washington has designated a state forest to which you may donate your composted remains.
Oh, that's a great idea.
We didn't go there, but I'm certain there will be Vermonters who will say, I want to produce something, make use of me. I'm no longer here, so
Right.
if you want to have a beautiful tree or, whatever. We're
So the
It's compost.
composted remains can be used in effect as compost.
It can be. Colorado addressed this. We did not. Colorado forbids selling the compost. You can see a reason for doing that. And they also forbid using it to grow food for human consumption. But again, we didn't go there. But I think if you chose to put it in the vegetable garden,
Right.
that's your choice.
so I guess we'll hear from Katie, where we did go in this bill. I assume it's not just totally open-ended. If a cottage or an industry develops around this new process, are there going to be any guidelines or regulations on how they operate? Is that in the bill?
Yeah, Katie will help you with that, but basically whatever applies to crematoriums applies here.
Because they have high heat capacity. Actually, I can see dual purpose here with the heat that is expelled from crematorium to help heat a composting facility. Could be a double
Yes,
design, dual purpose.
sure, I
opportunity.
imagine some of the same businesses would want to branch into this, yeah.
In addition to the energy issues that Senator Fluxion has raised, is there, it would seem that this would be less costly, right?
I'm sorry, say that.
It would seem like this would be less costly in terms of the
Yes.
process.
Basically, the cost involved in the facility here is having a place. That you do this, you need a facility, you need a sealed container. And that obviously takes up space. So that would be one of the biggest issues, I think, for a business wanting to do this.
So is it I think you said early on, you take the container, you fill it with wood chips or something like that, you place the body in there, and that's all there is to this? It's about as
And heat,
natural
so
as
you
you
have to
get.
apply heat.
You have to apply heat, okay.
Yeah, it has to, like compost, so,
Okay.
you know, professional compost facilities, they can, because it's such a high heat that's generated by compost. That's why we can put in the compost paper and stuff, can't do that in your backyard compost, it never gets hot enough. But a professional facility can do this, and the heat that it's generated is hot enough to be able to do this.
Right. And I understand that the containers have filters to allow the, natural gases that will come off.
So are we in any way inviting in this process? You make that pretty clear, but would it only be a matter of time where kits are being sold at Costco for people to do this in their own
Oh,
homes?
you could,
I doubt it, because I think this is probably a little bit too high tech.
Okay, I didn't realize it. It sounds so simple. It almost sounds like a.
Yeah,
but-
I don't think you.
So the containers are not just a simple container. They have to be fairly specific to withstand heat, and then they have to apply heat.
Right,
Okay.
yes.
Interesting. Thank you very much. We'll move to Katie. Katie, welcome.
Thank you. If you don't mind, I'm gonna
Good to
return
see
the
you.
floor.
yeah, it's like on the floor.
We are due on the floor at 11, so maybe in 10 minutes. Could you give us some items of the bill, however you want to approach that?
Sure. Good morning, Katie McLinn, Office of Legislative Counsel. Nice to see everyone. I haven't been in this committee in a while. So first I should just say my internet connection is unstable. If we get disconnected, I'll call the committee room and maybe you can listen to me on speaker for 10 minutes, but hopefully it won't come to that. So Representative Waltz did a great job of giving you the big picture of this bill. What it does is creates a new option for the disposition of human remains. And the bill defines natural organic reduction as the contained accelerated conversion of human remains into soil. So I don't think we'll have time to look at almost 40 pages of the bill in minute detail, but I thought it might be helpful to give you sort of the high level of what the bill is doing. The bill spans two subchapters in Title 18, the health title that governs burial and cemeteries, and it also amends a chapter in Title 26, the licensing chapter, with regard to funeral directors and operators of crematoriums. So you'll see that the amendments kind of span those two chapters. What the bill does is it sort of creates this sense of parity between the natural organic reduction process and the cremation process in terms of the rights and responsibilities of the operators of crematoriums, the same sort of rights and responsibilities in terms of permits that are needed, fees that are needed to be paid, licenses. It would pretty much be equivalent between the two types of operators. So much so that when the House committee upstairs was looking at the bill, OPR asked can we have one term for both of these types of facilities? So we have just one type of license and one fee. So that's why a lot of the changes that you'll see in the bill are changing the language of either a crematory establishment or crematory facility to a disposition facility to mean a facility for either natural organic reduction or cremation. So that's one of the big pieces that you'll see. There's also some changes in the bill where maybe cremation or cremated remains are specifically singled out, and there's, you know, a strike through to just refer to remains. So it's more general instead of referring to maybe burial spaces. The language might be a little bit broader, talk about the spaces for permanent disposition. So there's a try to, I would say, use consistent terms when we're talking about natural organic reduction and disposition facilities. So we're trying to get that consistency across 2 chapters, and also a sense of trying to broaden specific terms so that natural organic reduction could be included in some of the existing statutes. So those are the major changes. I'm happy to sort of walk through it a little bit more closely. One sort of hiccup that you should be aware of, in Title 26, you'll see that there are 2 fee sections, and that's because about 4 years ago, a new fee section was adopted, but it doesn't take effect until, I want to say, June 1, 2023. So we've had to amend the existing fee section that is active current law right now, and also amend the section of the fees that will take effect in June 1, 2023. The fees are the same for both. It's just a matter of a change to the fees that was made several years ago, and not wanting to lose the addition and changes of calling a crematory establishment a disposition facility in that language that was previously adopted. So I think that is the only sort of really technical piece that looks a little bit confusing in the second half of the bill.
So is there any language in the bill? I assume this composting goes on and then the family members go and pick up the cubic yard of compost. Once they do, is there any further restrictions on this process as to what they can do with that? I mean, I don't think there's anything governing ashes right now in the NERM, so I'm assuming there's nothing here either.
No, there's nothing specifically here that governs how it would be used. That wouldn't foreclose the health department, per se, from adopting rules to creating more specificity about where this, type of remains could be spread, but it's not part of the bill. And I would add, I'm sure you'll take testimony probably from folks in other states who are doing this, but the testimony that they heard upstairs, it sounded like a family wouldn't necessarily take home that full cubic yard, that they would maybe take home a couple of containers, and that the majority would be maybe donated to a restoration project on state lands or state forest lands. But you'll, I'm sure, hear more about that from folks in other states who are already doing this.
Is there any country out there that is more mature in this process, like it's commonplace in Europe somewhere?
I'm not sure about country. I'm happy to look into it. I was only aware of the states that have adopted it.
Great. It strikes me this would be a very Scandinavian thing to have done ahead of us. I mean, or just people who are energy, because this is really a big energy improvement, because we use a lot of energy and lots of.
Did you hear testimony, or was there testimony, Katie? Do you know of whether the way this has evolved in the states that have passed it, have the processes been joined at crematoriums, or is there competition between this and the crematorium? Like this is now the funeral homes have expanded to be jointly with crematoriums, and now is this just going to be or is it very distinct?
Yeah, so the woman who testified, I believe she was from Washington State, and she's operating a natural organic reduction facility. I know they took quite a bit of testimony from her, but I don't believe they took testimony from maybe like a competitor who is operating a crematorium in the same state. They did hear from a funeral director in Vermont, and I think there's generally a favorable response from the funeral directors, but I wouldn't want to speak from them. I think it would be worth your while to pull Vermont funeral directors in to get a sense of how this would impact the industry.
There's lots on Google about this. I have not found another country though. Oh, here, world's first human composting facility is opening in Western countries, is in Seattle. So it looks like America is first and there is not another country. The first one is supposedly in Seattle, Washington in 2021.
Okay.
And there's a picture of the whole
Does
system.
anybody have any other questions for Katie? For 5 minutes from the floor. We had another small bill dealing with the annual readjustment of the workers' comp surcharge. We won't deal with that today, but it's sort of a must-pass bill. So we'll take a break now. Thank you very much, Katie.
You're
We'll
welcome. Nice to see
probably
everyone.
have to walk through the bill at some point, but that's a good overview for us. So thank you. Okay.
Thanks.